in our
I'm sorry, I'm
work
still
with our students. And we found that given the different universities that we work in, there were different structures that are required structures that we had no control over, but there were elements that we did have control over that we wanted to recognize that relationship between universal design for learning and that first entry point to our courses for our students. So that's where the syllabus is the system, humanizing course design through universal design for learning came from. And I am excited to be able to share with you all today a little bit about our journey with that, some findings with that, and give you an opportunity to interact with it as well. So let's back up one slide and look at our agenda. We already looked at our framing of what we would want our students to experience or think when they came into our entered into our syllabi. But we're going to go into why UDL and why now. Why did we decide to do this research at this time? And I want to explain for a minute with my introduction. I'm Dr. Anne Ristow, and I had the pleasure of working with Michael Ralph, Linda Jimenez, Natsuko Take Me on this work because we were at this crossroad with the UDL implementation network, where the SIG group through CAST, where we really wanted to start getting more research available to our colleagues in higher education. And so we came together through that group, and we've continued to do additional projects and collaborations amongst each other and with CAST throughout these last several years. And you'll get to learn a little bit more about those projects that are in the works for this summer and fall when we conclude. So, why UDL and why now? I'll go into what was happening in society at that time, that we wrote the article and is still happening. We're going to share some key findings, and you're going to work on some syllabus moves of your own and try it out with an idea from your current syllabus for a little micro redesign. We'll have time to ask questions, but of course, if you have a question and you put it in the chat, I am always open to being interrupted. I don't consider it an interruption. I consider it a discussion. And then, like I said, we'll conclude with beyond the syllabus, looking at what's happening, scaling for systems. Sound good to everybody? All right, thank you. So we already talked a little bit about what do you hope students feel when they first open your syllabus. I actually transitioned from a Research One university to a community college. There's a lot of work to be done here in Florida in the US, and um, with things that are going on politically, I felt like it was really important to get closer to the teaching, and I wanted to also get closer to first generation college students and looking at universal design for learning as a system across higher ed. So I really was struggling when I came in, and I went from University of South Florida, where we designed our own syllabus. We had elements that were required, but we designed all of the other elements of the syllabus, to an establishment where we have simple syllabus, and the establishment really locks different screens and makes the experience of the syllabus a little more cumbersome and very technical. So it was great timing because I
como
actually
200 pesos debe costar.
I'm sorry? Oh, that was just I thought it was a question. Okay. Um, so when we thought about why UDL and why now, what was happening in higher education is, and where what we shared in the article itself, which I gave you an e-copy of, is there was a huge increase of the diversity of student population, anything from different races and ethnicities to genders, and an increase with students with disabilities identifying themselves in higher ed or being present in higher ed. And a couple of the things that stood out there that pertained to my campus is that first generation of students coming to college and representing and the weight of that has on their family and their responsibilities. And then also in this setting, I have a lot of people that are working while doing schooling, and that adds an additional impact than a student who would live in a dorm and be on campus, and that's their full-time job is doing their schoolwork. Another area in the research that we looked at was the outdated dichotomy of pedagogy and anagogy, and going from standardization to personalization. And how do you know when what is most appropriate? You know, people try to tend to throw one thing out and replace, but there's elements and strengths from both, depending on the application. So we found that pre-work very interesting and concluded to look at the syllabus because it was that entry point to us, that first point of contact, like I mentioned. So,
Anne,
yes,
I am actually not familiar with the andrago. What was the term?
oh,
And what that
andragogy,
means? Yeah.
oh, adult learning. So, pedagogy is the learning practices that happen in our K-12 systems. And it is also like our approach to curriculum, but then andragogy is adult learning and how we as adults differ or are similar to pedagogy,
Okay,
right? So,
thank you.
no problem. Okay, so we had some curiosities, and our curiosities formed in questions. And so our primary curiosity was looking at how is UDL being implemented by higher education educators and instructors. And we had lots of conversations in our SIG around people writing introduction units for UDL, people trying to integrate UDL into their courses. And it was very surface level. We were at those conversations of these are the guidelines and this is what we're doing, but we weren't talking about the actual practices. It was like we're giving multiple means of expression instead of what that looks like in a higher ed setting. And then for secondary, we looked at what patterns are there and how the implementation of some domains of UDL, of the UDL framework, is associated with the implementation of other UDL domains. So we wanted to look at the relationship. We wanted to look at the principles and instead of looking at them as columns, look at them as interwoven and how they overlap and how they interact with students in higher education. And then an additional question was looking at how do instructors navigate the integration of UDL practices alongside their other professional priorities and institutional policies outside their individual control. So it was really about how is it being implemented? What are the patterns? And what's the integration? And so we found a lot of great results from that fell into 5 categories. And the first was culture of safety. The next is inclusive language, humanizing pedagogy, interconnected UDL domains, and then what we coined as the warm demander pattern. And in the research itself, I'm going to give you just some snapshots here because I want to give you a chance to interact. But in the research itself, we have tables that break down examples from the syllabi and that UDL transformation, along with that guideline and checkpoint that related to it. So that's something that you can check out a little bit further. when we looked at culture of safety, what really stood out was that psychological safety as a prerequisite for risk taking and deep learning, and the role of the syllabi in setting the tone for that. And examples that we found were when there was opportunities for resubmission without penalty of work, flexible deadlines were a couple of the examples. And inclusive language, when we looked at that, it was really about affirming identities and honoring pronouns, offering resources, reducing threat so that I could feel like I had a sense of belonging in that course when I looked at that syllabi or the syllabus. The warm tone and clarity as UDL aligned design choices. So I know you can say, how can we do warm tone in the written text? But we definitely can. We get caught up in academia, and I love just taking what I write every time and putting it in Copilot because we're a Microsoft Teams college. Putting it in Copilot and saying, like, is this inviting to my students, or how could I not lose my integrity of responsibility that I need the student to take on, but say it in a way that is inviting to them. So, like really being thoughtful through that lens of the student in what I write to them. Humanizing pedagogy. This was where we found it was very interesting looking at how we're building agency and empowerment, opportunities for self-regulation, and authentic choice in the way that we write our syllabus. And so, with it being the site for promoting student voice and academic identity, I have actually had classes, depending on the level, where I have the students develop the course with me. They come that first night and we have the objectives and we have our Florida Educator Accomplished Practices because I work with pre-service educators. And we look through the 8 weeks that we have of the length of the course and lay out what is it that they want to learn from pre-service or pre-survey information that I collect from them, and how are we going to accomplish this over these weeks, and what resources do we need in addition to the resources that we have already aligned for the course. That's a way of humanizing pedagogy. Interconnected UDL domains. I talked a little bit about that before, and that was about the strong we found a strong correlation across engagement, representation, and action and expression. We saw people interacting with all three of those with the way that they wrote their syllabi, but the exception was that there was a weaker connection between engagement and representation. So we tended to look at how we're offering materials as being a form of engagement, but we didn't quite take it to that level of allowing students to represent their learning in different modalities. It typically was that learning had to be represented in an essay or the opportunity when it could have been there didn't offer doing an audio recording or a video recording, things like that. And so then when we looked at the warm demander pattern, we looked at that balance between structure and care. And we really felt like this differentiated from humanizing pedagogy, but we also found some similarities there. So, how we differentiated it was by looking at how in the syllabi we were modeling high expectations wrapped in empathy. So the syllabus excerpt that I'm going to share with you and let you engage with it a little bit is going to give you an example of that. But we really did find that the humanizing pedagogy and the warm demander really brings us to that opportunity to move into signaling humanity in our syllabi rather than it being a document that is the contract only. It's the way the contract is interacted with and written that we were most intrigued with and wrote about. So before I move into an interaction next, I want to see if there's any questions or inquiries or any insights that aha moments.
I I'm going to showcase that I am somewhat new in these fields. Um, all of this interconnected different aspects, are they all considered like UDL pure sang, or are these like UDL associated things or benefits that stem from how do I bring this to my understanding of UDL?
Yeah, they all are representations of UDL in different ways, and they're all interrelated with UDL. So it's how UDL plays out in our
Mm.
syllabi.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. And Carlos left a compliment on your presentation slide.
Oh, thank you.
Found it easy to see the differences this way.
Yeah, we tend to get wordy in research, right? And so being able to just break things down into bite-sized chunks can help us gain in the understanding and most importantly, the application, right? Because we want our students to benefit from the learning and extension of our learning that we experience. Okay, so we're going to engage a little bit now, and let me look at how many. Okay, I'm going to look at, okay, we have 11 people. So if you're okay, Talitha, with just breaking the 11 people up into, if that's 10, including me, let's do 3 rooms. So it's a small enough group. And before we do that, this is what I want you to have the opportunity to do. You cannot see the Padlet link right there, but it is here linked as well. And you should have the link in the handout in the box, but if not, I can stop sharing and give that to you. So first we have to make sure you have the Padlet link. I'm not sure why it didn't transfer over because it was there just about a half hour before we started. But we'll solve that problem. What we're going to do is we're going to go into a small breakout and really you're going to look at an excerpt from an anonymized syllabus. And you're going to think about which elements here support or hinder psychological safety, agency, or inclusion. And then there's a Padlet that we do not have the code for on the screen, where there's sticky notes or there's headers. And those headers say culture of safety, inclusive language, and humanizing pedagogy. And what I just want you to do is grapple together with how the excerpt either is an example or a non-example of some of these things. So let me show you. The excerpt is here, and it is also in the Padlet. So let me take us to the Padlet, and then I'll bring us back, hopefully. We may go down another journey here. Can you still see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in this Padlet that I'm going to make sure you have access to, here I can copy it right here.
I copied the link to the chat, so we can all click on the chat
Oh,
link to take us to
perfect.
the Padlet.
Yeah, thank you. You already put that in the chat?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, thank you so much. So now here in the Padlet, you're going to take those areas, three of those areas that I just spoke of, the culture of safety, the inclusive language, and the humanizing pedagogy, and look at the syllabus excerpt, which you can make it larger if you click on it. Which element in the syllabus um, supports or hinders that psychological safety, agency, or inclusion that we want to develop in our students. And just put examples under the category that you associate it with. There's no wrong answer here. It's your experience and exposure to the content there in that excerpt.
All right. So let me know if you still have trouble accessing the Padlet, but the rooms are open. Can I allow multiple people to share screen? No.
I think that we can post in the meeting room notes. You know how you can send a message? We could post the link again for them.
Looks like Brenda is alone. I'm going to move her to room 3. Does that work? Yeah, that's better. All right, let me also pause the recording. You have to unmute. It does that automatically.
All right, I was going to say, I know that I didn't mute. Okay, no problem. So I jumped into the first room and it was great to have the conversation. And I see like only one person got a comment put into the Padlet. So why don't we just do a share out? If you are okay with me saying what I heard, and then that group can extend upon it because I didn't catch everything. And then maybe the next group could share a little bit about your conversation. Um, so the first thing I was like, oh, I got to write this down. Someone said, well, it feels a little stern, like it feels a little stern and really puts the readers on edge. If if the goal is of clarity, it was off-putting. And the consequences were very excluding. And there was ambiguous language as well. And so someone gave the example of like there also was any if there's any disregard regardless of cause, like it's like you're setting the student up like I don't believe that what you're going to tell me is valuable or worthy of me, then it becomes a hierarchy of allowing you to do this or that. The Similar points could be made by reframing was shared and doing it in a way that's like, here are things for success. You can get that point across, just like we found in the research when we were reviewing the syllabi. There was so much of that negative approach and like just telling instead of it being a reframing of I'm here for your success. This document represents our success, and these are the things that will help you be successful in this course. More contractual, and there were a few of the people that participated in the research that shared about how even though their syllabus are contractual, like they write it with the students. Like there's a formal syllabus, and then they write it with the students in like this is your course, like you're paying for this course, and what helps you be successful in the objectives that we need to complete. And then someone had said, where is the care? And I thought that that was really brilliant because if I was reading it as a student, would I feel cared for? Would I feel welcomed? Like I had mentioned at the beginning, the whole point of why we did this research. So I don't know if anyone from that group wants to fill in the blanks from my sloppy copy, but
You did a great job. We pretty much discussed what you shared, and yeah, if I was a student reading this, I would be like, oh, so even if I'm sick, I need to show up because if I don't show up, I'm gonna lose points or have some sort of a consequence or penalty, as Ree was mentioning.
mhm, mhm. And what about the other room? What did you all discuss?
I think we worked hard to find positive angles because it was pretty punitively written. There was mention of the instructor thinking of student success. Brenda, I think, mentioned how the at the bottom part there was clarity. Like I think we should all behave in a proper way. And then there was also, which was outside of the snippet that we saw, but there were going to be some things listed there. So there there were guidelines, and I think we were thinking that was probably good, but we had trouble seeing the syllabus as a welcoming space.
Mhm,
Sure.
mhm.
And I hopped in and out, so I probably missed several things here.
Oh, I couldn't leave. I was I was so intrigued with the
Mm.
conversation. I couldn't leave. Um, okay, so where I wanted to go next was to give you a chance to do a little micro redesign, but rather than taking time to go into a Padlet to do that, why don't you just think, I'm sure when you were engaging with that, you either had some ouch moments where you're like, I might have some of that in my syllabus. Or, wow, like I am really inviting my students in and give us examples, right? So give us an ouch or give us an example of a wow, like I'm really happy I have this change because now I know that it is welcoming for my students and it's not so off far-fetched for our profession. Okay, so ouch or wow. Anybody? I know your mics are muted, but come on, you all have syllabi.
As I was reading some of your slides earlier, I pulled up one of my syllabi because I realized I never put my pronouns in there, even though that's such a common thing to do now. I just forgot about that. So I put that in. It was a small ouch, maybe something I could
Yeah.
improve easily. So I did that. Thank you. Um, Other things. Yeah, I do ask for attendance, but I also tell the students this is college. Most of the days it's up to you, but when we have a speaker, I want that speaker to see a classroom full and have these interactions with students because they're taking time out of their day to come. And so I explained to them why I wanted attendance on just a few days in the quarter, and it would be a small part of their grade, but I want to make sure that, they come.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like I have the only reason I've added seemingly stern sounding language in my syllabus over time is because I've been burned, like one semester by not saying something explicitly, and then students were like, "Oh, but you didn't say it in the syllabus," so, and then the next time I have to be like, "Oh, I need to include that in my syllabus," like, things related to academic integrity, like tardiness, things like that.
Yeah.
Um, I've added them either at the request of my students or, I've had situations where my language was really vague, and then they didn't really have clear guidelines. And so I've had to update that to make it more clear.
Well, and we all have departments that have policies. Whether we agree with that policy or not, we have a policy. But then in our syllabus, like a great reminder for me, and I co-wrote the article, but I've been living this world of program manager for exceptional student education and department chair, and we had no policies. We had no student handbook when I came in, and so trying to get those things in play and knowing that you have to put some things in play and revise along the way, some of the policies I don't agree with that my colleagues voted on and agreed in. And they contradict our college policy. We're a no attendance taking college, but I have colleagues who will drop you a full letter grade if you're not in class. And so it's those conversations that come from it, though, about the humanizing side of things and thinking about, um, okay, we work with pre-service educators. So how do we relate to them the importance of showing up for the students that you're going to serve while honoring the lives that they're living while they're in the field during the day, in class at night, and working full time? And um, it really is about meeting those objectives then and the competencies. And so for me, I have engagements that we do in class that they can't do without us. And those things they can still do and get feedback on and not receive points. But it's my way of making sure they're meeting the objectives, even if they miss class, instead of it just being a battle of, what do you mean a full grade? Like that's a lot. That's a lot. And we get sick and we have family members who need your help and are stranded on the side of the road and life happens. So how do we make sure? And that's where that component of the warm demander comes into play. It's that empathy. It's the high expectations and having those tough conversations sometimes with our students about, well, maybe this isn't the time for you to take full courses. Maybe we need to cut back part-time, and this is what it could look like for you. And yes, it's going to prolong your in time with us, but you'll be able to actually be prepared for the profession that you're going into. So really looking at holding that line can be done with care. It's just then keeping the level of expectation there so that we have people who are prepared for us for pre-service education. And for others, it might be for the next course they're going into or for their internship in their field or their apprenticeship, or when we go from those foundational concepts to build into the methods, to build into the application, to then build into demonstration so that we can be successful contributors of society. So I believe we had 50 minutes and it's 4:52. So I do want to just take you back to the slides real quick. And I don't know if they're there. Let's see if we can see this. Yep. Um, okay. Um, where I want to go is I'm going to bypass our next engagement. And in the chat, I have my facilitator notes that has exactly what I was going to have you do with your micro redesign. So you're welcome to engage with your syllabus in private and really have a heart to heart. You might want to have a little glass of wine with that if you're a wine drinker. Um, and that will support you with the additional notes that I had there. But where I want to take you now is just to some closing question about that small change. We just talked about that a little bit. Um, but what stands out to you? And I will share these projects, but what stands out to you? Just one takeaway from thinking about your syllabus over this last less than hour.
Hmm.
I
No, I
think
was
for
just,
me,
yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry,
No,
go ahead.
nope, no.
I was gonna say the warm demander, like uh, how do I communicate high expectations but do it in a tone that's not uh, not unfriendly or unwelcoming to students.
Mhm.
Melanie, what about you?
No, I was just going to say, I feel like my syllabus has changed a lot, so as a result of the pandemic, we really shifted towards this very flexible format, where, we really thought, I gave a lot of thought to my syllabus before pandemic, post pandemic, and how we can be accommodating and really using that looking at it for that language and now I kind of feel like we're shifting back a little bit to being a little bit more restrictive for some of the reasons that I think were described. And maybe in our breakout room, we talked about, having unlimited submissions or things like that. So I feel personally like I've kind of shifted back a little bit. Not so much maybe in like stern or punitive language, but just not being completely flexible with all of our different policies because I don't think that was helpful either.
Mhm. Was there someone else who was okay? Okay, so these are some things that are in the works. We're scaling UDL systems, and I have three major components or focus areas for my research and my practice that helps keep me going and keeps me relevant to the students that I get the pleasure to serve every day here at the college. And one is looking at UDL system implementation. And we are looking at UDL as the higher education system or the institutional system and have created a UDL roadmap for higher education. I don't know if you're familiar in the K-12 system, there's a roadmap or a um, criteria. And we didn't want to have a blue ribbon or anything like that associated with it, but we did over the last 4 years research and evidence on what does UDL look like at that systemic level and how can we gauge. So there's criteria involved in that. There's examples from different teaching components in higher ed, not just pre-service, not just the education focus. And there's the direct correlation with the UDL guidelines. And we are excited. We were able to partner with CAST at the end of the work, and that is going to be published on their website. And we are presenting at the UDL conference in July and then doing a webinar for them, I believe in September. And in October, we're doing a micro course with them on it. And it's a very exciting place to be is, because you can write it. We had loads of people from across the country and Australia and Austria and England that contributed to it. And so we're so excited to get other people's perspectives and experiences. And just looking at all of the things going on right now in America with alignment to instructional minutes, RSI, accessibility, and getting ready to write some pieces on that. And then working with Sam Johnston from CAST. She's coming in this next year to support some institutional coherence through our teacher prep program. So I'm excited to have that work going on. I've also had an incredible opportunity for collaborations and working with a lot of people from CAST and Natsuko Take Me and Jill Hawkinson, I think is her last name, and Elizabeth Hitchens. We came together as a small group and we're working on rolling out a UDL International Research Hub so that people will have one location to access higher education research for UDL. And we're working on some cross-institutional partnerships with advisory board items and things like that. So I'm mentioning all of these not to be like, oh, wow, Anne's got all this stuff going on, but any of these things that interest you, like reach out because there's always room for more. And we're looking at advancing applied UDL scholarship and making sure that we're connecting and not losing the rigor of our outcomes when people try to combat that. Am I teaching how people can receive and honoring and respecting the individual? And in doing that, am I losing the academics and that balance piece? So some of you had mentioned that today, so that was really good. And then I just am working on a book with a colleague that's going to come out within this next month or so, maybe 6 weeks since the semester is getting ready to end, on prompting as pedagogy and bringing in universal design for learning with AI. And then we have published on UDL, social emotional learning and AI in teacher education, as well as looking at AI for variability, access, and design supports within our teacher prep programs. And we're looking at emerging instructional applications of AI within UDL through cognitive science. Florida is finally getting on board with cognitive science as a focus, but they're not actually rolling it out until 2027 with an expectation of 2029, but it's coming. So I'm very excited about that because the role of UDL in getting our students to that metacognitive thinking and the inclusion of AI with that is a great opportunity to be in education right now. So thank you so much for having me, and I will make sure that you have all of the resources in one email so that it's not like, where did I find that in the chat? I always go to a go to a webinar or go to a session and then can't find anything. So I'll make sure that you all have that. You have my email, you have this presentation. Feel free to reach out. And if there's any questions that I can answer, hang with me. But otherwise, it's been a pleasure to be with you. If I can leave you with one thing, it's just to remember that your syllabus is that first act of teaching. And so let's make it welcoming, just like we would like it to be for us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.